Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's work group for the fiscal year 2023-24 funding plan for clean transportation incentives relating to our heavy-duty projects, the Clean Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Project, Innovative Small E-Fleets, or ISEF, and the Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Project, or CORE. My name is Matt Williams, and I'm the lead staff for HVIP. I'm joined today by several other CARB staff, including Rochelle Bishop, the manager overseeing these programs, Todd Sterling, the lead staff for CORE, Olivia Lane, the lead staff for ISEF, and Eric Brown, who is helping to facilitate this webinar. Before we get started, a little information on meeting logistics. The meeting is being recorded. The recording and a list of participants will be made available on the Low Carbon Transportation Investments and Air Quality Improvement Program Meetings and Workshops webpage in about 2 weeks. Today's agenda and the slides we're using are available on that webpage now. And Eric, can you just check to make sure that the chat allows us to send messages to everyone? Or Andrea, thank you. We will be leveraging Zoom's raised hand feature to facilitate comments and questions. If there are Zoom disruptions for any reason, including malicious intent, we will immediately end today's meeting and send out another meeting notice to reschedule. And lastly, we are unable to allow anonymous meeting participants for security reasons. Please make sure your name is clear on the Zoom platform. If you are participating by phone and raise your hand by pressing #2, we will call on you based on the last 4 digits of your phone number. Thank you, Eric. And I've added a link in the chat to our meetings and workshops webpage so you can access the meeting materials for today. The purpose of this meeting is to share our proposals for the use of funds appropriated by the legislature in the fiscal year 2023-24 budget and changes to program criteria for the heavy-duty projects under clean transportation incentives, those being the Clean Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Project, or HVIP, Innovative Small E-Fleets, or ISEF, and the Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Project, or CORE. This is also an opportunity to get feedback on those items from our stakeholders and answer questions on specifics. We'll start with an overview of the development schedule for the annual funding plan for clean transportation incentives before sharing the details of this fiscal year's budget bill. Then we'll run through our proposals for each of the heavy-duty projects. The annual funding plan for clean transportation incentives is developed alongside and following the legislature's annual budget. We continue to hold daytime workgroup meetings like this one, as well as evening community meetings specifically to increase participation from community members. A final workshop for the entire funding plan proposal will be on August 31st, followed by release of the funding plan in October and a board hearing for approval toward the end of the year. For more information on the upcoming meetings and the funding plan as a whole, please visit our website now in the chat. The fiscal year 2023-24 budget approved by the legislature and governor includes $80 million from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or GGRF, and $28.6 million from the Air Quality Improvement Fund, or AQIP. The $80 million was designated specifically for zero-emission drayage trucks funded through HVIP, and the AQIP appropriation is programmed largely at CARB's discretion, which we'll discuss later. This year, the legislature also approved $375 million in funding for zero-emission school buses and supporting infrastructure. Please note that this is part of the $1.125 billion of school bus funding that was included in last year's budget and approved in last year's funding plan. As part of the legislature's prudent fiscal approach to the 2023 budget, the $1.125 billion appropriation was reduced to $375 million. However, the legislature indicated that they intend to keep the $1.125 billion program whole by appropriating $375 million in the next 2 fiscal years to CARB. I will pause here for initial questions about this meeting before we dive in. We ask that you raise your hand to let us know that you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. We will then unmute your line, and you may need to unmute yourself as well. For those of you participating via phone, please press #2 to raise your hand, and we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. Please state your name and affiliation before beginning your question or comment.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'm seeing a couple questions. The first question is going to come from Mark. Mark, will you please state your name and affiliation? I am unmuting your mic right now.
I'm Mark Roost with Sustainable Energy, Inc., and I'm an advisor to the Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition. I'm calling because we see the best path forward as converting the existing fleet, particularly school buses. We converted the original school bus, the 40-foot Bluebird school bus 9 or so years ago, from diesel to full battery electric. That technology has evolved through about 3 generations of improvements since then, but we have no funding. And we want to bring a sample, basically we want to start converting existing school buses to full battery electric. It's an ideal use case. And what I've seen a policy drift toward is actually only for new replacements instead of converting and rehabilitating. Refurbishing and converting is what's needed. The costs of doing that will, in volume, I've been told, would be as low as $60,000 to $100,000 per bus for a 40-foot full-size bus, especially if by buying batteries in volume, and especially with our batteries, which we expect to be much lower in cost. And for drayage trucks also, and other over-the-road trucks, also much higher in capacity per kilogram. Thank you.
Mark, I'm Andrea Morgan. I'm the lead staff for our school bus programs here at CARB. So wanted to chat a little bit about why we're really focusing on new buses with some of the programs. I should note that there are options out there for conversions for school buses, like through the standard HVIP program. But for this $375 million that you see coming in, we do expect it to really be focused on new school buses. And there are a couple of reasons for that. There is a scrappage requirement that's baked into the budget bill that this $375 million for public school buses came in with. And we're really trying to focus on replacing some of the oldest buses in the state. On average, the average publicly owned school bus that's operating in California is about model year 2010. And it's really our understanding that for a lot of the conversions, it's most optimal to be using a newer bus, especially with some of the oldest buses that we're wanting to transition to zero emission that come before seatbelt requirements took effect. In those cases, it often is more cost effective to actually purchase a new bus than to go through and do the engine conversion to zero emission and switch out all of the seats to add in the seat belts as well. So that's part of the reason that you're starting to see this focus on the new buses as opposed to conversions in some of our programs that are really focused on replacing and scrapping older school buses out there. But standard HVIP, still a great source for conversions, and conversions of buses are eligible there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for helping me understand that. And there's one other piece of it, which is that the same group can convert new buses, especially if you can get them as rollers. If they were getting them in volume, they could get them as rollers. They wouldn't even have to take out the engine and sell it. They could simply take the roller and put the power drivetrain into it. And again, that would be more timely and better power, and a variety of benefits, and probably much lower cost than building a new bus from scratch on a small line with low volume, because they're going to buy a high volume bus, and then, or the customer will buy a high volume bus and then they will convert that before it's ever delivered. So how about that? Would that be covered by this project?
So the 375 million you see on the screen, we do anticipate there being requirements that an older model year bus be scrapped.
No, I'm saying, okay, but in order to get the new bus, instead of buying a new electric bus from a low volume line, buy a new roller bus without a diesel engine, or a new diesel engine that's going to be handed off to somebody else, like a drayage truck conversion, and then put the
Mark,
new drivetrain. I'm asking if you guys could fund that.
I understand your question, and I think it is going to be a kind of detailed conversation that we need to have about some eligibility requirements. And so I think that would be better for us to discuss offline here.
All right.
We can get to some other questions, but thanks for raising it today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And before we move on to the next question, just want to clarify that this pause for questions is about the meeting in general. The budget that we showed here, as well as the agenda and things like that, we will get into program specifics in the following slides, and that will be the appropriate time to ask program specific questions.
Yep, I was just going to say the same thing. So with that being said, I see some more hands raised, but before I call on those hands raised, we will have an opportunity to get into the nitty gritty of the different programs. If people still have their hands raised, I'm happy to call on them, but if not, maybe lower your hand. Okay, with that, Jerry, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation. You're going to have to unmute on your end as well, Jerry.
Jerry Roan with TriTrack Motors. Our technology moves freight from the port to the nearest distribution center, taking a lot of diesel trucks out of the heart of the city. It uses a monorail and electric vehicles with solar power, solar only power. Is that eligible for this program? You could call it off-road because it's not on the road, but it's not really off-road.
So again, this portion is just about the meeting itself, as well as the budget for questions about eligibility, components of individual programs like the Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Project. We'll save those questions for when we reach those slides.
So again, I'm gonna say the same thing before I call on the next person, knowing what Matt said. If you want to lower your hand, go ahead and lower your hand. We'll have an opportunity to talk about program specific questions coming up. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna Matt, I'm gonna allow you to speak. Please state your name and affiliation. You'll need to unmute on your end as well.
Good morning, everybody. Matt Schrapp from the Harbor Trucking Association. This is going to be an interesting webinar, I'm sure. I did have a question. Perhaps I missed it. Is this being recorded?
Yes, this meeting is being recorded, and we will post the recording to our meetings and workshops webpage within 2 weeks. The link to that is in the chat.
Thank you. I saw the little blinking cloud up there, but just confirming. So thank you. Looking forward to the discussion. I'm glad we have 3 hours to go through all this.
Glad to have you, Matt. Thanks.
Okay, our next question is going to come from Mark. Mark, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Good morning, Mark Perry with the California Energy Commission. With regards to the drayage trucks, is that actual drayage from ports and rail yards to inland warehousing, or does that include the day cabs for your heavy duty last mile deliveries?
It would include any vehicle registered as a drayage truck, so in the drayage registry.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and our last question on this topic is going to come from Brent Stevens. Brent Stevens, I have unmuted your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yeah, Brett Stevens, Daimler Trucks North America. Happy to defer this to a later part of the session, but since it is regarding budget appropriations, I'd like to ask what happens to the remaining $62 million from fiscal year 21-22 and $250 million 22-23 that is allocated for the standard HVIP vouchers that is going unallocated.
So you're referring to funds that were appropriated in previous budget bills that are currently in the HVIP program and available?
Yes.
Okay, that money will continue to be programmed through HVIP. When we run through HVIP, which is the first agenda item, we will talk about changes to program criteria that we are proposing that would apply to those funds.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Okay, actually, we do have one more question, and then we're going to move forward. Edna, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation. Edna, you have to unmute on your end as well. Okay, looks like having some difficulty on your end with microphone or something along those lines. Feel free to raise your hand. I think at this point, we're going to go ahead and move on.
Thank you, Eric. And yeah, Edna, if, after we move through the HVIP slides, we'll pause again for comments and questions. And if you still have a comment or question, please raise your hand and we'll get to you first. As HVIP enters its 13th year, the project continues to adapt to changing needs. This year, the project strengthens its focus on supporting underserved fleets and priority vehicle types and preparing the state for upcoming regulatory deadlines. Staff proposes incorporating lessons learned from the oversubscribed ISEF pilot by moving all standard small fleet purchases to HVIP, providing the same elevated incentives that had been offered in ISEF and supplementing ISEF funding from HVIP, among other things. So we will run through, I should have brought this up later. So starting with an introduction to the HVIP program, HVIP has been around since 2010. It's designed to accelerate market transformation by reducing the purchase price of higher cost zero emission technologies. We have a commitment to support priority populations by implementing community-driven clean transportation and equitable investments, and this comes through in several ways, including elevated voucher amounts for vehicles deployed in disadvantaged and low-income communities. It is available statewide with set-asides to ensure availability of funding for high-priority vehicle types, and we also have voucher enhancements for priority fleets, vocations, and locations. There are over 150 eligible truck and bus models in HVIP, including zero emission and electric power takeoff, and funding for retrofits and new Class 2B through Class 8 vehicles. Notably, HVIP does not require scrappage and has so far issued over 11,000 vouchers since inception, totaling $844 million, with over 60% of vehicles deployed in priority communities. HVIP several years ago established guiding principles that have continued to run year to year. The guiding principles for HVIP, which we consider whenever making program changes in our day-to-day operation, include accelerating market transformation for the cleanest advanced technologies, supporting the goals laid out in CARB's long-term heavy-duty investment strategy, making sure that our incentives are driving purchase decisions, maintaining simplicity and a fleet-friendly process, supporting CARB's regulatory programs, avoiding market disruptions caused by unpredictable funding availability, graduating established technologies, and supporting more equitable investments, such as supporting small fleets and small businesses. The first change that we're proposing this year is to fleet size limits. The fiscal year 2022-23 funding plan established that beginning January 1st, 2024, private fleets with more than 50 medium and heavy-duty vehicles would no longer be eligible for HVIP. However, given expected demand ahead of advanced clean fleets regulatory requirements and other measures designed to ensure fund availability for small fleets, such as the bulk purchase requirement, the California legislature has directed CARB to delay the eligibility change to January 1st, 2025 per AB 102 appropriation provisions. We would maintain exemptions for public agencies, California Native American tribal governments, and nonprofits, And we would again maintain other mechanisms designed to ensure fund availability for small fleets, such as the bulk purchase requirement and voucher discounts for very large fleets. The Innovative Small E-Fleets pilot, funded as a set aside within HVIP, is entirely focused on helping small businesses access zero emission trucks through elevated purchase incentives and innovative access solutions like truck as a service and expanded leasing and rental opportunities. Since its establishment, demand for ISEF has far exceeded funding. To help meet that demand and further serve California's small businesses, staff proposes the following changes. We would like to align the HVIP small fleet definition with that of ISEF and match standard purchase incentives. This would result in HVIP offering double the base voucher amount to fleets with fewer than 20 medium and heavy duty vehicles and less than $15 million in annual revenue. All standard purchases formerly made through ISEF will be funded through HVIP standard, allowing ISEF to focus on innovative solutions for small fleets. The change in small fleet definition applies in all uses, including expanded stacking eligibility and the disadvantaged community voucher modifier. We also propose moving $50 million from HVIP standard to innovative small e-fleets to ensure ISEF's ability to continue to fund innovative projects such as truck as a service. Enhancements for drayage and refuse trucks. Staff proposes to extend the 25% voucher enhancements for zero emission drayage and refuse trucks until December 31st, 2024. Transitioning drayage trucks to zero emission remains an important priority to support Executive Order N7920 and to provide benefits in California's priority populations communities. Similarly, refuse trucks are present in all communities statewide, but their impacts are felt particularly strongly by priority populations located near waste transfer stations who are burdened by multiple pollution sources. As usual, in every year, we also consider changes to base voucher amounts based on technology types and costs, and that review is ongoing now. A manufacturer rolling soft cap was established in 2020 to improve HVIP funding availability and encourage faster vehicle delivery. To reduce the administrative burden and better meet these goals, the manufacturer soft cap will be eliminated in favor of ad hoc review of manufacturer performance with vehicle delivery. Staff proposes to work with all manufacturers through the public work group process and implementation next year to determine metrics for review, such as a minimum purchase, or such as a minimum percentage of vehicle delivery, as well as potential actions CARB can take to encourage faster delivery. Some potential metrics for that review could be a share of vouchers by model with extension requests or average redemption times. And potential consequences or ways that we would implement the manufacturer performance review is we could have conferences with the manufacturer to assess the reasons for extension requests or other things and determine likely timelines for voucher redemption. We could establish holds on new requests for an affected model. Altogether, this would allow us to be far more exacting in ensuring that the what we had established as the rolling soft cap accomplishes the goal of encouraging faster delivery and better user experience for purchasers. We have several other policy changes under consideration. First, CMO, or Clean Mobility Options, is a statewide program that empowers under-resourced communities across California to better understand and overcome mobility obstacles with vouchers for funding community needs assessments and clean shared zero-emission transportation projects. With limited funding and high demand, where allowed by applicable law, staff proposes reducing fiscal strain on CMO by using HVIP to cover costs for HVIP-eligible vehicles in project proposals. The change for grant recipients would be seamless. If an applicant proposes a project that includes HVIP-eligible vehicles, HVIP, rather than CMO, would cover those incentive costs, leaving more funding in CMO for additional projects. Next year, staff will launch $375 million in grants for local educational agency school bus replacement grants. This is anticipated to be the first year of a 3-year program totaling $1.125 billion. While the legislature indicated that the funding should be prioritized for zero-emission school buses, they did provide an option to allow school districts to purchase cleaner combustion technologies if the school districts could demonstrate substantial barriers to adopting zero-emission school buses. Given the considerable demand for zero-emission school buses, and oversubscription of all recent funding programs for zero-emission school buses, staff proposed to only provide funding for zero-emission school buses next year to ensure that funding is available as quickly as possible. Over the course of the next year, staff will work with stakeholders to develop criteria to evaluate the unique challenges faced by some school districts and requirements for low-emission renewable school bus replacement grants with the potential for such grants in future years if needed. We would also like to explore additional mechanisms for small fleet assistance to address challenges around borrowing costs, residual value, and insurance. I will pause here for questions and comments about the proposed program changes for fiscal year 2023-24. If there are questions or comments, please raise your hand or press #2 if you're on the phone, and we will call on you. As a reminder, please state your name and affiliation before beginning your question or comment.
Okay, before I take question, I do want to remind people also that I just thought of, if you didn't register for the meeting yourself and you accepted somebody else's invite from inside your agency, the name will be still tagged to that person, just in case. I'm just bringing that up from Edna earlier. If for some reason you're not Edna and you didn't understand why you got called on, if people forward the meeting requests, they'll be with the name that originally registered. So with that, the first question is going to come from Alejandra. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Alejandra Mieri Teran. I'm the Executive Director of the Otay Mesa Chamber of Commerce. We are in the border area in San Diego. And context-wise, I want to say we have 4,000 trucks that cross the border northbound and southbound, so 8,000 crossings every single day. We had a wonderful event with CARB yesterday where they explained a lot of these programs. And while we feel that the California truck operators are supported, and while maybe some changes need to be made, we are extremely concerned and kind of surprised that nothing is being proposed either as a pilot to the cross-border truckers that will be tremendously impacted. Right before the adoption of the rule, SANDAG, the San Diego Association of Governments, put out a study that showed that over 80% of the border crossings are being done by Mexican domiciled trucks. So these are border community trucks that, from my knowledge of yesterday's events and what I saw today, and I'm certainly no expert, is none of these Mexican operators, even though some of them, many of them have California operations as well, they have also a Mexican-based company. And all of these trucks, more than 80% again, are doing these Mexican crossings, or these crossings across the border, short haul crossings, will not be eligible for any kind of funding for trucks, which basically means that they won't be able to go transfer to zero emission. And what we think is, well, what will happen? I mean, will California companies go into Tijuana to pick up merchandise from manufacturers? Is this truck as a, you call it truck as a service? These companies won't be able to pick up merchandise in manufacturing facilities because they need a specific like CTPAT certification. That's a federal program that's tied to their supply chain. They won't go into Tijuana because they're scared. We don't understand what's going to happen in 2030 when these Mexican trucks cannot buy zero emission. And I was hoping to see some sort of pilot. I can't tell you what the solution is, but I can tell you that California can certainly allocate some sort of funding for these cross-border companies that have a California presence, but their Mexican trucks are basically idling right on the border in our underserved community of Otay Mesa, and they're polluting. So if you help them, you're helping California, you're helping our border community. And I'm just wondering why no funding is being designed around the border when Mexico is California's #1 trading partner. And looking at the HVIP guidelines, it says one of the goals is avoid market disruption. So I would think that it really falls, making sure trade continues to work aligns with HVIP. So we would be happy to try to, I don't have a solution. I know there could be limitations, but why isn't anyone that understands the border sitting down with CARB to try to figure this out?
Hi, Alejandro. Thank you so much for that question. So this is an issue that we are aware of, and I'm happy to say that right now HVIP rules do allow for trucks that operate in Mexico to be funded. HVIP requirements do currently require only that the vehicles be or that the vehicles have a DMV registration, which I believe every truck that operates across the border at least is dual plated. So even if they're registered in Mexico, they're also registered with California DMV. And it also requires that the company operating the vehicle be registered with the California Secretary of State. So those are the only requirements that are specifically spelled out in the implementation manual. So this truck should be eligible for funding through HVIP, and we are doing a lot of work internally to make sure that HVIP will be available to these trucks.
Just to clarify, when you say registered in the California Secretary of State, that means that your location is in Otay Mesa. If you're Mexican domicile, you could have your partner in California and your truck is registered to the Mexican company. Then you don't have a registration in the California Secretary of State. So that takes them out of the picture. Or maybe I'm not understanding. When you say you're registered with the California Secretary of State, that means you're domiciled in California.
No, that doesn't. So you can register as a business with California Secretary of State without your vehicles having to stay in California.
With a Mexican address.
As far as I know, yeah, the registration with Secretary of State is, I believe, actually optional, and perhaps someone else can chime in.
I hope
but
so, because that would be
not for
very
HVIP,
important
but I
point.
mean that anyone can register with the California Secretary of State to conduct business in California.
Well, I would love to get that clarification, and I don't believe anyone in Mexico knows that. But so if that's, yes, you're right, they are registered with the DMV. So then they would have to, if that is an option, but can someone clarify if you are a Mexican business, you can register with the California Secretary of State?
I believe so, but Alejandra, this is something that we're still doing a lot of research on internally as well. We'd love to meet with you. It sounds like you're well connected to these businesses and could provide us the insight that we need to make any necessary program modifications. So would it be all right for me to reach out to you so we can
Yes,
follow up after
absolutely.
this meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Our next question or comment is going to come from Glenn. Glenn, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Glenn Cho from Toyota Motors North America. Matt, slide 9 on that slide, I had a question for you and the CARB team. We recognize that there has been change to the timing from January 1, 2024 to January 1, 2025. So if I'm a fleet with 51 trucks, I'm now eligible, according to this slide, for HVIP funding. However, we have a concern that's written within the ISEF regulation, which specifies that basically come January 1, 2024, if you're a regulated party, you're not allowed to use these funds. So my question to the CARB team is, are you going to reach out to the ISEF team to propose that they change the timing of that rule in terms of the being eligible to get funding?
The language in the funding plan, which will be coming out in a month or a couple months, does specify the interface between our incentive programs, including HVIP and the regulations. HVIP cannot pay for compliance, but HVIP can always pay for vehicles prior to a regulatory requirement or in excess of a regulatory requirement. My understanding is that So that is the easy explanation. HVIP will remain available to fleets of all sizes until January 1st, 2025, and HVIP will remain available for vehicle purchases in excess of or prior to a regulatory deadline.
So even with this change, if you are a fleet with 51 trucks, then you're regulated under ACF, then you're no longer eligible for HVIP is basically still the bottom line. Come
And-
January 1, 2024.
And the details of that requirement of the ACF rule, we would need to talk specifically with them. So I appreciate your recommendation that we work with ACF to provide clarification on that topic, and we will do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Bill. Bill, I'm going to unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Bill Boyce, representing the California Electric Transportation Coalition. CalETC has been a big supporter of HVIP from its inception. So more kudos to CARB for this program going over a decade and continuing to try to get incentives out to the market. One of the suggestions we have or comment is it's really hard to gain a perspective on all these changes and the need for the changes. Wondering if there could be some sort of table that looks at, like Matt, you mentioned that oversubscription is, you could show like the different categories and flavors of how many applications have been made in a given year, how many incentives went out. And, you know, that type of data would be really good in taking a look at, you know, how some of these changes are, you know, coming in for recommendations. And, you know, if you take a look at it, you know, we've been oversubscribed in this category for the, you know, smaller fleets and, you know, trying to move the money to where some of those applications are, or, you know, with regards to policy, changing some of those priorities is certainly good, but seeing a year-to-year breakdown. And secondary to that would be also, you know, some metrics on what the market's doing for vehicle sales beyond the incentivized ones. So we could really get a look at, you know, how is the, you know, market maturity kind of starting, you know, recognizing that everything's very nascent here. HVIP has been very key in getting everything started. You know, as we just talked about, ACF's kicking in, some of the categories are gonna kind of change, but you know, anyhow, some data that would really kind of help put everything in perspective, we thought would be a good thing to do in order to show, you know, the program changes. And when you're asking for these changes and support, you know, that would really provide a lot more data to help that guidance. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Bill. That also overlaps with our long-term heavy-duty investment strategy, which helps to define the metrics of success of our program. So we'll take that into account there as well. Thank you. I've also dropped into the chat a link to the HVIP website, which includes a page on the impacts HVIP has had, including a dashboard of where vouchers are going, requests over time, and things like that.
Thank you, Matt. Our next question is going to come from Jose. Jose, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, this is Saul de los Santos from the Ministry of Economy of the state of Baja California. I'm quite glad that Alejandra went before me. My comment is regarding the same issue regarding industry-related trucking that go across the border in the communities in Southern California. We do need to figure out a way to assist those companies in the transition. Those 4,000 trucks are basically serving the supply chain and the markets related to medical devices, consumer electronics, and so forth for the California market and for the U.S. Economy. So in that sense, it's part of the value chains of North America. And in other instances, it wouldn't be feasible for those companies and for that fleet to have the transition according to the schedules that's being put forth by CARB. I'm very glad to hear that there's that possibility to find a way in assisting and providing guidelines and clarification for those companies to be eligible. We're currently working in an assessment of this community of companies that would be available close to the end of the year. So we would be more than glad to specify a way, like maybe a work table, a work group, so we can figure out solutions to address this specific community. More than a question, it's a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Saul. Yes, we want zero emission trucks everywhere, and that includes in border communities. So we'll be sure to work with you and other stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay, our next comment or questioning, our next comment or question is coming from Brett. Brett, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yeah, thank you. Brett Stevens, Daimler Trucks North America. It's been our observation that voucher counts, including redeemed vouchers, have been precipitously dropping throughout the year, especially in the Class 8 segment. Significant funding still remains for standard vouchers from 22 and 23. One could surmise that HVIP is currently not driving early adoption in that segment. What is CARB's plan to drive early adoption for fleets that will be regulated by ACF? And not to marginalize the smaller fleets, but our country's larger fleets are disproportionately responsible for moving the country's freight. This is their learning phase. Many are still on the sidelines, waiting to see what happens in the regulatory landscape. And there's a lot of confusion around a vehicle funded through HVIP's compliance towards ACF in the future. And just curious to hear CARB's perspective on how successful the adjustments made for fiscal year 23 have been in driving adoption in the Class 8 segment for fleets.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. So voucher demand is always had a degree of unpredictability to it. We are always monitoring the demand for the program and ways in which we can improve its efficacy. Of course, as ACF approaches, we know that there is heightened demand from large fleets that will be respondent to the regulation. But we also have to make sure that funds remain for small fleets. So having funding available is certainly not a bad thing. In fact, one of the guiding principles of HVIP is the continued availability of funds and not having a start-stop cycle. But we understand that there is a balance to be had there. The implementation manual that is the updated implementation manual coming out will have more details on how we intend to create that balance.
I guess a direct question, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing with Class 8 vouchers decreasing? And that seems irregardless of fleet size.
It's hard because we don't have a baseline. Class 8 trucks have only been, Class 8 zero emission trucks are still pretty new in HVIP. So it's hard to establish a baseline by which we can definitively say that demand is up or down. Again, there's always a level of unpredictability in voucher requests. That is the only thing that is nothing new. But currently there is plenty of funding available, and we don't see that as a bad thing.
Thank you.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Andrew Schwartz. Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Yeah. So Andy Schwartz with Tesla. I guess I had a few clarifying questions, and then a comment and question I think dovetails with the comment that Brett just made. So first, I guess I was on the extension of the 25% bonus for ZEV Class 8 drayage. I missed the date. Is that extended through the end of 2024 or through January 1st, 2024?
That would be through the end of 2024.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I guess I was hoping for a little more clarification, a little more clarity on what the removing of the manufacturer soft cap means. Does it mean that there's sort of a hard cap that entities are subject to, but CARB will, on an ad hoc basis, determine whether or not one can hold more vouchers than what that hard cap is?
So it actually means that we would remove the cap entirely and that we would just have the flexibility. We're always monitoring performance on vouchers, how long they've been alive, how long it takes to get redeemed, all these metrics. So this would just allow us to be more precise in where we interface with manufacturers if vouchers are taking a longer time than average, or if a specific model is having issues to be delivered. So we could be more precise rather than just having a set cap for a manufacturer.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
so
great.
the details of this, we're going to have in our implementation work groups next year. We will work through the details of this, but again, the goal is just to ensure that trucks are delivered in a timely manner, and this would be a different way of accomplishing that, a way that we think would be more effective.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. All right, the next question I had, or maybe it's more of sort of a building off of the comment I think the representative of Toyota made about kind of the interaction between HVIP and ACF. I think the high level explanation you provided or response you provided was good, but there are some kind of devil in details aspects to this. So, for example, if an entity is subject to ACF and they select let's say the milestone pathway, technically for Class 8 tractors, if memory serves, they wouldn't have an obligation until something like 2027. Does that mean that purchases of Class 8 tractors prior to 2027 by that entity would be able to use HVIP? And, when 2027 hits, count those vehicles towards their compliance obligations? I think there are sort of like nuances like that I think would just be really helpful to have a clear answer to.
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of these questions. Understandably, there's people want to make sure that they understand what the interface is going to be. And to that effect, we think the easiest way, the most effective way to provide answers to all these questions is simply to put them in writing. So the updated implementation manual that will be coming out soon will have a section just about this that will explain these nuances and provide examples of exactly how that interface will work. That language is also going to appear in the forthcoming funding plan as well as a fact sheet.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing that material. Okay, and then my last question, I think, really is kind of a piece with what the representative from Daimler was raising. So I guess I am just curious, what steps CARB is taking to really assess the impacts of some of the changes that a number of stakeholders, including Tesla, viewed as problematic to the HVIP eligibility requirements. So for example, I think we really appreciate the extension of the time frame within which large fleets would still be eligible, but you still have the minimum purchase requirement, which we see as a really significant hurdle for large fleet participation, even if they otherwise qualify. And I guess I'm just curious, like, what things CARB is doing to evaluate the impacts of policies like that on uptake, not just sort of in terms of voucher. I think it's pretty obvious that it will have it'll adversely impact or reduce the number of large fleets that are participating in HVIP. But outside of HVIP, I think the hypothesis from CARB was that these entities will purchase those vehicles anyway. And I'm just curious if you all are taking steps to assess kind of the impacts, on uptake, whether via incentivized purchases or non-incentivized purchases by those large fleets in the face of those types of changes.
Certainly, we always have interaction with the fleets that participate in HVIP and those that don't and come to us. So we have lots of means of assessing the impacts of our policy decisions. I would say that like for this specifically, we have heard from fleets that they found that the bulk purchase requirement was challenging. But that's kind of the point. It is a mechanism, especially with us pushing back the change in eligibility requirements by another year. It is increasingly important that we ensure that funds are available to the small fleets that wouldn't have to buy zero emission trucks at some point anyways. That's really where we get the most bang for our buck in our incentives.
Yeah, I guess I understand kind of the motivation, but I guess I haven't heard much or seen much in terms of an assessment of the impacts on the overall market on uptake. And I think that's kind of exactly the same. I mean, I'm basically reiterating, I think, what Brett was raising earlier. But we do have concerns that the decision to focus, almost exclusively on larger fleets is going to have some adverse impacts in terms of the overall uptake of these vehicles in the market. Because I could question the hypothesis that I think CARB was putting forward that larger fleets will buy these vehicles anyway. And that's an empirical question that I just hope CARB is taking steps to assess.
Yeah, and of course, we're always tracking the total number of zero emission trucks and buses in California. That info is available on the HVIP website. But certainly I'd welcome your input or ideas on other ways that we might conduct that type of assessment.
Sure, I'll take that back. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Ben. Ben, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hey, thanks so much. This is Ben Drake with Workhorse Group. We're a class 4 through 6 OEM, all electric OEM, also make all electric drones. Just wanted to applaud the focus here that you're putting on the ISEF program. With the $50 million, you're clearly seeing demand in the class 4 through 6 space. We also see significant demand for this, especially from the independent contractors that comprise the significant majority of the industry. So appreciate the focus on that. And I think, part of that leads us to the metrics that you laid out. I think the time to redeem vouchers is really important, as you put up in the slides. The other piece of it is the utilization rates themselves. Unfortunately, as we all are aware, there's a high rate of unredeemed vouchers. And I think those kind of metrics can really help drive some significant growth in the areas that the state's looking to move out in. And that also leads to the your focus on potentially removing the soft caps. I just would want to say that there's truly an imbalance in the disbursement of those vouchers to date. And I think that removing that cap is a good way of normalizing it. We've always been trying to understand the calculus behind the number of vouchers by manufacturer. And so I think that this is a good way of removing some uncertainty in the system and providing an option that can normalize it across the field. So that's my comments. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Great, thank you.
Okay, our next comments or question is going to come from Sam. Sam, I'm going to go ahead and mute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, thank you. This is Sam Bayless with Nikola. I had a little trouble getting onto the meeting, so maybe I missed it. Are there going to be any metrics for oversight, accountability, that sort of thing for the implementer? It seems like there's been a lot of delays. The implementation manual, it's hard to get responses. When our dealer has a problem. So happy to take specifics offline, but just wanted to see if there was anything that was going to put a little more oversight or accountability on the implementation of all this.
CARB always has full oversight over the program. Our grant agreements are very detailed with all of our grantees. The program has been going through a lot of changes recently. The delay in publishing an IM has not been due to our grantee, but changes that we continue to make to refine and ensure it's the best product.
Got it. Thank you. And as for delays on reimbursement, voucher processing, I do understand that there have been changes going on and that has slowed down some of the processing. But like I said, it's been hard to get any responses or even just any sort of update, status report, things like that. I think that more communication would make dealers feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as always, we encourage participants to reach out to CARB directly if you have feedback or need help with any particular issue.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we have. It's just been hard. It's a lot of finger pointing back towards the implementer or their contractor. So just trying to figure out even who we should be reaching out to is difficult because we seem to get a different answer.
Yeah, when in doubt, go ahead and reach out to CARB.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from I apologize. Yaswantha, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Before I do though, I do want to state that, you know, we do have a lot of questions, got quite a few hands up. So, you know, I'm taking questions as they come in. So if you're raising and then re-lowering your hand, you're dropping back down to the bottom of the list. So just know that we will get to you. Whoops. Okay, Yaswantha, you can go ahead and unmute your microphone, state your name and affiliation.
Hey, good morning. This is Yashwant Madineni. I'm with Nicola as well. I'd like to add what my colleague Sam here just spoke. We have been facing multiple delays. Our dealers are having issues with when they submit for voucher requests, they're getting questions back because the EO model year and VIN marketing model year are different. But when we submit for emission certification, we list marketing model years there. For example, when we were approved for 2023 EO, it already includes 2023 and 2024 marketing VIN model years. But that wouldn't be on the EO. So when the voucher is submitted, they cross-check with EO and VIN model year, and there's a mismatch causing additional delays back and forth between dealers and CARB staff. And has the CARB considered this as a feedback for future implementation manual?
Yeah, so it's important that we ensure all documentation is complete before we issue payment. That's part of our oversight responsibility. But I will just say that this work group is specifically about the changes proposed for the fiscal year 2023-24 funding plan and related to the fiscal year 23-24 budget. So I'm happy to take all of this offline with you.
Okay, perfect. We'll take back that. Thank you.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Mark. Mark, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Mark Roost, Sustainable Energy Inc. And hold on a second here. Okay. I'd like to discuss finance subsidies taking advantage of the far lower life cycle costs of battery electric vehicles with solar and stationary battery energy provision, and bootstrap our industry when ready to commercialize, which should be by 2024. And also we need development funds to get there in terms of the battery and solar, advanced battery and solar thing. But actually right now, with the technology available today, the cost of provision of energy plus the lower operating costs could make it possible for, if you have good financing with no net negative cash flow, by setting the financing to equal the savings, then a company in Mexico or here that has little income could get the vehicle and start getting the savings, pay for it with the savings, and then once the financing is paid for, all of a sudden they actually have a much better cash flow because they now no longer have to pay for much vehicle maintenance or replacement vehicles and things like that, because it'll last last 1 million miles or more.
So Mark, for pre-commercial and early commercial technologies, the appropriate venue would be the advanced technology demonstration and pilot projects. I can't speak much about that right now because there is an open solicitation, but please look for that on our website if you'd like to participate in a potential pilot project there. And then regarding other financing options, as I mentioned in the slides, through HVIP and ISEF, we are exploring additional mechanisms for small fleet assistance to address challenges around borrowing costs, residual value, and insurance. We're just starting that thinking now, and we'll continue through the next year.
Can we support that thinking?
Absolutely. That is the public process. Yes, please get involved. And when we start having implementation work groups next year, that's where we'll start to have those conversations with our stakeholders.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Nahui. Nahui, I apologize if I mispronounce your name. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, good morning. This is Nawi Olin from Nicola as well. Just to follow up on a question that was brought up. In terms of unredeemed vouchers and being able to manage the different requirements imposed on OEMs, is there any way that we could perhaps have access as an OEM view to the VPC so we can basically have more access to this data on unredeemed vouchers, be able to better be able to manage these so we can also help the program be successful?
We've been having some issues with some manufacturers not sharing information internally amongst themselves. So the designated contact for the HVIP program does receive every single month a list of all of their vouchers, the state of all their vouchers, and all the information related to them. So we're trying to make sure that manufacturers are connecting their people internally to have access to that information.
And how often is that information sent
I
out to you?
believe it's monthly.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow up on that. And just one other question. I didn't see any information on potential changes to the fuel cell voucher amounts. Any information on how long that will remain for the 100% modifier?
I don't believe there was ever a timeline that was set for an expiry of that voucher modifier, so it would remain
Just indefinitely or?
until a policy decision is made to end it, but we're not proposing that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Brett. Brett, go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
I believe I never lowered my hand again.
Oh.
I apologize.
All right, let me, I will lower your hand for you. Oh, there you go. Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Madison. Madison, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, thank you. Madison Vanderclay with Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Just wanted to say thank you so much for hosting this webinar. Definitely super helpful. And then also to echo some previous comments just in terms of supporting a collection of data on how eligibility, these recent eligibility changes may impact fleet electrification, as well as looking forward to clarification on the interplay between HVIP and ACF obligations. But overall, just very grateful for this webinar. Thanks.
Absolutely. That'll all be out soon. Thank you, Madison.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Lisa. Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, this is Lisa McGee with Tom's Truck Center. So I wanted to refer you a couple things. I'll start with slide 7. Can you explain as it relates to the retrofits as it compares to conversions? Is this used vehicles? I'll start there and then I have a follow-up.
Nothing new there. This is just the background slide about what HVIP has always done. So for details on vehicle technology eligibility, you can refer to the existing implementation manual. That section is not changing in any proposed updates.
Okay. And on slide 8, you talk about the simplicity and the user friendliness. So some observations that we've experienced, which I think really need a process and a mechanism, would be the redemption payment. 7 to 14 days is a stretch of the imagination in today's process. It didn't used to be, but it is a real issue today. And I think as, for example, with hydrogen, you've got a rebate amount of $240,000. And you take 5 of those units, you've got 3 million. You take 30 of those units, you got 7 million. Honestly, dealerships cannot survive with months in and out as it relates to a payment process. It'll take people out of this process out of fear of risking their own business. So I just think there needs to be some accountability to the reasonableness associated with solving a problem, even if it's internal. Until maybe if there's glitches or other things going on, that things are just approached in a way that prioritizes them based on the seriousness. Then also as it relates to some of the implementation and the complexity with things that aren't kept accurate in real time. For example, right now, the DAC map is new. It still uses the same links. I know it's just an updated URL to the same link. But the legend doesn't have a green color on it. very confusing. It really needs a better, simple, user-friendly, accurate interpretation so that the end users, fleets, dealerships, everybody can create a process that reduces the back and forth by everybody. It's everybody's time. And as we grow these programs, all of these things will have an experience that creates a poor experience. And then the confusion can take the small fleets, just wipes them out. So just things like that, I think are things that I've been recognizing as opportunities for improvement. Let's see, I do highly support, what page did you guys end on with your, did you go into the fleet size for small yet? I think you did, didn't you?
Yep, we covered everything already.
Okay, so I would say I highly support your process for introducing the small fleets like you're doing with the ISEF. I think that's a strong step in the right direction. I want to highlight that I'd love to make sure that dealerships, really large dealerships in your California baseline for trucks, if we could start having a serious conversation about rentals. My first thought is like a try before you buy solution for small fleets, rent it for 6 months, buy it. I'm not sure how we would develop it, but I think there are ways that we could achieve better results for everybody, especially in the small spaces. I certainly support your 2023 HVIP standard with 50 million and some other opportunities here. I will also echo, I think it was Nicola had reached out about the accountability associated, or at least the visibility associated with dealerships and OEMs. I think that'll solve some of the problems, even with bad vouchers that may not be visible to the OEM, that it's creating OEM cap issues and maybe just a process that where it should just be eliminated. Last thing I want to highlight is attestations and model year changes. We've been going back and forth on trying to get something resolved and still don't have any clarity on it. These things could really help a dealership out with customers that really want to order. We're literally afraid to put too much out there in fear that we may not be able to meet a deadline of 18 months and so forth. So thank you.
Thank you for all those. I will just point out to everyone that yes, the priority populations map was updated earlier this year. The HVIP FAQ page has been updated with an explainer of the new, how to read that new map, and I've included a link to that in the chat.
Thank you very much, Matt. And I'm going to let everybody know that I have 4 raised hands right now. And once we've answered these 4 raised hand questions, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic. If we have time at the end of the entire presentation, we will more than happy to take questions on everything that we presented today to fill out the allotment of time. So with that being said, Sarah, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, my name is Sarah Roeder. I'm with Lightning eMotors, and I have a couple questions today. So thank you for your time and thank you for hosting this webinar. My first question is about kind of going what Lisa just mentioned, the average redemption time. I saw on the slides that you are planning to calculate that metric and keep on top of it. And I'm just wondering what steps are in place, like what's the plan to reduce that timeline and reduce that metric?
So that metric as it was listed there was related to our manufacturer performance review. So that is looking at really, essentially that is a proxy for how long it takes a manufacturer to deliver a vehicle after it has been ordered, so that we can ensure speedy delivery of vehicles within HVIP. But I do understand that dealers can't sit on some of these costs for a long period of time, especially flooring costs. In addition, we want vouchers to be redeemed and payment made in a timely manner, but we also have an obligation to do our due diligence and ensure the proper expenditure of public funds, especially as Lisa was mentioning, sometimes those amounts are in the millions of dollars, and it's very important that we receive all of the documentation and everything is correct before we make payment.
Totally understand. One thing that I would recommend to reduce the documentation burden and potentially speed up the process for redeeming the vouchers, so that we're not bankrolling the HVIP vouchers for too long. So one thing that has been a big hurdle for us to redeem vouchers with our customers is the DMV tax receipts requirement. Since Lightning does not collect sales tax ourselves, our customers pay those taxes to the DMV when they register. And Tetra Tech has been requiring that we submit the DMV tax receipts that have a breakdown of all the taxes and fees paid. I understand the requirement and the due diligence, but our customers wouldn't be able to register without having paid the sales tax. And a lot of those customers don't get the receipts when they register because they use third-party agents. So that we're having to wait for months for them to mail in a letter to request those receipts, and then the DMV to mail them those receipts for every single vehicle they've registered. And if it's a lot of vehicles, it just takes a lot of time. And wondering if we could use registration cards as proof of sales tax paid.
Okay, I believe this one has come to us, but I will just double check and make sure that this is under consideration.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah.
I apologize, Sarah. I didn't mean to cut you off while you were thinking, Matt. Matt, speaking of Matt, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation. Even though I know you had a comment before, we just want to keep with that throughout the entire webinar.
Well, I love being consistent. This is Matt Schrapp with the Harbor Trucking Association. So appreciate all the information here. I think there's been some great comments by some of these questionnaires so far. You know, especially in my previous life, understanding the challenges that dealerships go through in trying to get these HVIP funded vehicles on into the hands of their customers while not putting their own business at risk. I think definitely perhaps you guys should engage Tetra Tech and CalStart in some type of working group with your dealership partners to really understand their challenges and perhaps some modifications. I understand the need for due diligence. We're talking millions of dollars here, but you know, these are businesses on the dealership level that, Matt, you mentioned flooring. That's just one component. It's when, as the representative from Lightning was alluding to, you're bankrolling basically a vehicle that's been taken, registered, that you're no longer in possession of, that now you have a shortfall on your books that you could be waiting who knows how long. So that would be a first recommendation, but I have separate questions. Number one, Matt, can you tell me what an early adopter is in drayage?
I mean, that's not something that we define for the purposes of eligibility. We're just considering that anyone adopting one of those two vehicle types is an early adopter of the technology, and that's why we offer the higher incentive.
But isn't the higher incentive contingent upon early adoption? So theoretically, aren't you defining it in that regard? So, but you're not defining it? Maybe I'm trying to understand because first of all, drayage really has the least flexibility, right? Mm-hmm. There is no fleet requirements. You're a drayage truck or you're not a drayage truck. And while I can sympathize with our friends and colleagues who are subject to the high priority fleets requirement, the drayage doesn't have as many off ramps or considerations. And especially going back to the fleet size, I think that is in particular something that we need to make sure everyone understands. And it might be helpful to have an ACF staffer on these calls just to answer some of those questions that might come up. But so you guys mention it, but you're not defining it. Is that correct?
I think we're overthinking it here. We are providing this voucher enhancement to zero emission drayage trucks.
And until 1/1/25, right?
Correct.
And so then what happens after 1/1/25?
Well, it would end unless we made a decision otherwise.
And okay, so then I guess leading on that, why move the $50 million from HVIP to ISEF?
That is, of course, separate, and that is to support small fleets, undercapitalized fleets in the greatest need of assistance.
And so your guys' definition is 20 trucks or 15 million in revenue?
Yeah, less than 20 for those specific small fleet support.
Why not make it an either or? I mean, there's definitely fleets that have over 20 trucks that make less than 15 million in revenue.
That's something we'll consider.
And kind of to the point from Bill from CalETC, at one point in time, I had seen, and I appreciate you sharing that, that link there for the information on the HVIP page about what has been, distributed relative to HVIP funds now, but and I'm scrolling back through it again because I didn't get to the end, but I'm not seeing like a breakdown of where these HVIP funds have been going by GVWR, by vocation, by manufacturer. I know it's out there somewhere, but it's relatively difficult to find. I don't know, maybe if you can just share that in the chat with everybody here, or one of the staff can share that with us just so we can get an idea about, previous demand. And I get that, yeah, HVIP is unpredictable, but I think you saw this precipitous fall off because mainly I get the Amazon effect, but when we're talking drayage, you have fleets that are basically under the same efficiency constraints regardless of what your fleet size is. You're needing to move in and out of ports and intermodal rail yards in California, especially like the large ports. And you kind of said it yourself, right? That these trucks are still pretty new to HVIP, despite the fact that, the ARB has utilized the HVIP number of vehicles on HVIP to help justify the ACF. That when we remove that or implemented especially the purchase requirement, and then the decreased amounts over 150 trucks, that I think the large fleets that I talked to, that they would have exercised this. A lot of times, some of these things are flapping out in the wind. And again, class 8 drayage is not class 6, package delivery vans. But from these larger fleets, they have told me directly that they would have exercised many more vouchers this year and deployed the supporting infrastructure to go along with it if that purchase requirement wasn't there. And why it's important to think about the larger fleets is because they populate a secondary market. And that's where small fleets traditionally have purchased equipment in drayage and throughout the rest of, vocations in California, save a couple. And if you look at the number of vehicles, the 116 zero emission vehicles that are registered in the ports of LA and Long Beach's port drayage truck registry out of 21,000, you'll see that those are large fleets that have those trucks. And while JETSI is happening, again, large fleets. There is an ability for larger, more well-capitalized fleets to absorb some of the cost challenges, especially because of the unpredictability of energy costs as well. And, the price parity that everyone talks about that small fleets and everyone will get to, I don't know when that's going to happen exactly, because costs just seem to keep going up for equipment. And so we think that I get helping small fleets, and maybe one way is to do that either or on 20 trucks or 15 million in revenue, but it's undersubscribed because you guys are focusing in the wrong place. And if you truly are here to, within the guidelines, support the regulatory programs, there would be much more aggressive push to assist drayage, like legitimate drayage carriers, not the smaller GVWR operators, but if we're talking drayage, which has the first requirements under HVIP, under ACF, again, regardless of fleet size, that would be implemented to help populate zero emission vehicles into the system while the infrastructure develops. But it doesn't seem like you guys have an appetite to do so. A question on the over 50 that is being stalled out. I mean, if you have over 50 trucks, you're still subject to a decreased amount. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the only change that we're proposing there is the delay of the eligibility change to January 1st, 25. We're not proposing any changes to bulk purchase requirement.
Right, of course. But if I have 51 trucks, I get a decreased voucher amount. Is that correct?
I believe that does start at 50 trucks, or maybe 100.
I
that
know
was
it definitely
last
went
year's.
100 and it was supposed to be with 50. I haven't kept track to see if that was happening. So maybe something that some staff.
Yeah, it does start at 100, the decrease.
And you mentioned that, it's kind of your guys' prerogative whether or not you continue the drayage enhancement after 1/1/25, right?
So that is in the legislation, that's in the budget, the appropriation language, January 1st, 25.
But it's do you need legislative direction then to extend that past 1/1/25?
We would, yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, there's this, I guess here's an easy one. Do hydrogen vehicles, zero emission vehicles, they aren't subject to the fleet size caps or reduced amounts, or are they?
There is an exception for hydrogen that's in last year's funding plan, so I point you to that, but we do need to move on. So Matt, for any additional questions, please reach out to me directly and we'd be happy to work with you. And then I'll just
Thank you. I
answer
appreciate that.
one of them, because I'm sure it applies to other people, with the data about where vouchers are going and with which manufacturers and stuff. That is all on the HVIP about page. Within the map, you can filter by location, by technology type, by vehicle type. You can also download the full data set from there, and that includes even more information, including all the things I think you're looking for.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that, and understanding we need to move on here. I get it.
And there will be an opportunity at the end if we have time to.
Right. I'm not trying to sell any technology here. I'm just trying to bring these things to light, like our colleagues from the Otay Mesa Chamber, that this stuff seems to be happening in dark rooms without any real input from people who are actually building and operating this equipment, that the restrictions are backwards. And, we're just going to be subject to the same issue where you guys have undersubscribed HVIP, despite the fact, I get it, it's unpredictable, but man, this is very challenging, because if we want to get this equipment out into the system, get it to the people who can afford it. If you don't want to fund Amazon, that's fine. Look at the drayage sector. Look at those trucks, prove that you've been in a drayage truck, that you have the ability, again, no fleet size requirements or anything, very few off ramps, especially for people who are subject to public facing charging. So I feel like we have a lot of room to improvement here, and there's very little willingness to do so. So I appreciate the invite, Matt. And again, thank you for your staff's time.
Yep, we hear you. No dark rooms. This is the public process. This is why we're all here. Eric, if we can go to the next question.
Yep, we have two more questions. The next question is going to come from Peter. Question or comments are going to come from Peter. Peter, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation. Peter, you got to unmute on your end as well. There you go.
Can you guys hear me now? All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, Peter Tewell from Hyzon Motors. Actually, I'll back Matt on this last comment. As a frontline guy selling the Class 8 tractors to the port, there's a disconnect for sure. And I hope you guys would definitely sit down with Matt and talk more about it. But smaller fleets are definitely more scared in this environment with lighter loads, fewer loads, and so forth. So yeah, definitely, there's definitely a lot of truth to what Matt was saying. My question to you is there fuel cell enhancement, the 2X for Class 6, 7?
I believe, and someone else on the HVIP team might know this, but no, I believe it is just for Class 8.
And can that be changed because we can modify to get to a Class 7?
That is something that we can consider. Yeah.
Right. And that would be through you, Matt?
Yep, that would be through us.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, and our last comment or question on this topic before we move on is going to come from Rose. Rose, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. Rose Jansen from Mack Trucks, and a newbie in this really cool space of EV and voucher world. And I'm going to go back a couple of questions, and hopefully this is a really easy admin question for the new girl. VPC, one, break that down. What does that acronym mean? And two, I understand that there is an internal database that the right person from the OEM or whoever has applied for these vouchers would be able to track the existing vouchers that are in play. And if so, how would I update that database to show the right person from our company?
So the VPC is the voucher processing center. That is the system by which all vouchers are tracked and all documentation is uploaded and attached to the voucher. So that's basically the whole computer system that makes HVIP work. And you can reach out to your contact at Tetra Tech or CalStart directly to clarify who should be receiving the monthly voucher summary.
Cool. Perfect. That was easy. Thanks. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no problem. Thank you.
All right,
Okay, so I think that's all the questions we have to that, right, Eric?
that is correct. We are ready to move on to our next topic.
Okay, then we will do that and I will hand it off to Olivia.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Olivia Lane. I am the CARB lead on the Innovative Small E-Fleet program. Go to the next slide. I'm just going to be giving a quick overview of ISEF and discussing proposed changes to the program. I will also be available to answer questions about the program or these possible changes. Next slide, thank you. So the Innovative Small E-Fleet program, or ISEF, was established as a set-aside within HVIP in the 2021-2022 funding plan. The set-aside was designed to help small fleets and independent owner-operators overcome barriers to ZAG market entry and pilot innovative mechanisms. And so when we refer to that, we're talking about all-inclusive leases, rentals, truck as a service, things like that. Eligible small fleet participants include companies with 20 or fewer trucks that operate in California and that make less than $15 million in annual revenue. Recently, we took nonprofits out of that revenue requirement. So nonprofits are exempt from those that $15 million revenue cap. So far, a significant share of ISEF has been requested for standard purchases. And a high demand has been shown from small fleets who are seeking these advanced technologies. So while ISEF funding was requested within the day of the opening last year, a smaller proportion of funds were requested for innovative solutions beyond a standard purchase, which was a major goal of ISEF, was to encourage these innovative solutions such as truck as a service and other mechanisms. So the ISEF team right now is currently soliciting new innovative solution providers and encouraging these approaches. ISEF will open for the second year of voucher requests at the end of the month on August 30th. If you have any questions about the opening date or how to participate, please reach out to me as soon as possible. And we can go to the next slide, Matt. All right, so while ISEF is opening at the end of the month for voucher requests for small fleets towards vehicle purchases and partnerships with innovative solution providers, we are proposing changes for next year that will not affect these vouchers that are requested at the end of the month. So for next year, we propose that funding is allocated solely to projects that explore innovative mechanisms beyond a standard purchase. So the proposed changes would increase the diversity of projects that CARB has funded, and will also allow staff to understand different use cases and how these vehicles can be utilized by small fleets in California. So all of these changes will be used to inform HVIP policy and to determine how we ensure small fleets are getting the assistance needed to overcome barriers to medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle adoption. So as mentioned earlier in the presentation, small fleets would still receive increased vouchers for standard purchases. This would just happen through standard HVIP and not the ISEF set aside. Staff is also considering expanding ISEF eligible vehicles to include certain buses for transporting people that may be commonly used by small businesses such as daycares and retirement homes. For funding allocation, staff is recommending a preliminary $14.3 million from the Air Quality Improvement Program, or HVIP, and the board will make a final decision on this allocation during the funding plan board hearing later this year. So that concludes my portion of the slides. If you have any questions about ISEF or the proposed changes, you can raise your hand at this time.
Okay, we have a few hands raised. I do want to remind everybody before I call on you that right now we're taking questions specifically about ISEF. If you have another question about something we talked about before, we'll go ahead and get to those at the end if we still have time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call on the first person. Brett, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yeah, Brett Stevens, Daimler Trucks. Olivia, is there any way to get a data set that highlights what vehicle classifications are primarily utilize the ISEF funding?
Yeah, so right now we're still in processing. There is quite a few vouchers that are in the final stage stages of redemption. But I am actually working on looking through what was requested in the first year. So once we do have that breakdown, I'm happy to share that information. Are you interested in the breakdown of the technology types and different classes? Is that what you're referring to?
I mean, yeah, whatever data set would be available, obviously,
Okay.
you know, vehicle classification, technology type, any bellwether of who's actually, you know, what vehicles are being sought after under this program.
Yeah, I think that's something we can share. This is my first year working on this program, so I'm not sure exactly what we usually share, but I would be happy to follow up with you, Brett, once I do that breakdown.
Anything else, Brett?
I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
We're very appreciative to get that information.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Alejandra again. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yes, thank you. Alejandra Militeran with the Utah Mesa Chamber of Commerce. On the ISEF regarding the less than 20 trucks, how do you define that? Because in the high priority, I know the more than 50 is defined globally. Again, we're in the sort of cross-border world where we have operators that may have 15 trucks in their California company and maybe have 30 in Mexico, different legal entity, some sort of obviously common ownership. Is that considered a small fleet? Let's say they have in their California operation 15 trucks.
Yeah, so I need to double check what we say exactly in our implementation manual, but I believe it's vehicles that operate in California.
So Olivia, correct me if I'm wrong, the ISEF does follow the HVIP IM, right? So when the updated HVIP IM comes out, so the HVIP implementation manual that is forthcoming mirrors the ACF definition. So it includes vehicles under common ownership or control anywhere.
Okay, and that's coming out in the new ISEF IM, right?
Yeah, the new HVIP
IM. Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so that would mean then 20 globally, Mexico and US combined is what you're saying then, right? Okay.
Yeah, just like ACF.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Mark. Mark, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Mark Roost, Sustainable Energy Inc. and Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition. And I'm wondering about ICEF for school buses in terms of this innovative purchasing process. We might be able to work with that. So I wanted to find out if that can include school buses as well as transit, as well as the buses you mentioned.
Yeah, so currently school buses are not eligible for ISEF. Right now, eligibility for ISEF only includes class 2B through 8 trucks. It excludes people moving vehicles. We are considering including smaller buses that wouldn't be included in the transit or school bus set aside. We do have the school bus set aside with, I believe, increased vouchers. So at this time, I don't think we would include school buses in ISEF. But Andrea, I don't know if you guys have considered anything like that for ISEF in the past.
No, so essentially with ISEF, the primary focus has been on the trucking fleets and privately owned businesses. So school buses do have some substantial funding opportunities that are available for them. Some of it being the school bus set aside that Olivia just mentioned, and additional funding that will be opening next year, the $375 million. US EPA also has some programs out there that can provide funding to third-party operators that do almost more like this sort of bus as a service model. So that's a great opportunity to look into. I believe US EPA currently has funding open, and that will be open until August 22nd.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and move on. Next comment or question is gonna come from Lisa. Lisa, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi there, my name is Lisa McGee. I'm with Tom's Truck Center. We're highly supportive of the innovative small electric fleet program and some of the innovative opportunities that could come from next go around. Currently, we've addressed a couple of issues that we think are critical to a fleet-friendly process and something that's going to be simple. Currently, the process in the forms, whether it be the voucher request form or the terms and conditions, we brought this up in 2022, and we also brought it up this year, and the forms still don't adequately support the fleet for a rental or a short-term lease. For example, on the procedure form, the first question asks for the procedure information, and it literally says, no, the voucher request is submitted. Leasee and user fleet operator cannot change in the lease. And so that takes away from understanding how that's going to specifically support an end user that's going to be a rental or short-term lease. And the same holds true for the terms and conditions 3, 5, 6, 13, 14, 16, 18, 28. It also reiterates keeping the vehicle for 3 years. You can't change it. You've got to register it. And so obviously the provider would be the one registering it and keeping it for 3 years. And so some of these things can be really improved to spur adoption. In 2022, you claimed you had 0 rentals, when in fact Tom's Trucks actually had 2. But either way, it was a very low number. And part of this is one of the issues that are coming out of it is dealerships certainly don't want to lead fleets down the wrong path and get to the finish line with terms and conditions that clearly just don't support a process that they feel comfortable with. And it's just not simple. So hoping that you guys can improve that immediately to produce more rentals and short-term leases. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And that is something that we met with you guys on and worked with for these existing rental vouchers. And we're going to be kind of reviewing those forms and terms and condition forms moving forward, because we do want to see more of these short-term leases, and we do want it to be an easy process for fleets who are doing these short-term rentals, because we do see that as a really great opportunity for small fleets to try out these technologies. So we'll be working with you guys and improving those forms so that we can see more of these voucher requests going forward. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Hank. Hank, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, thank you. My name is Hank Kaplan. I'm from the CSU Office of the Chancellor, California State University Office of the Chancellor. My question just relates to this new proposed update, which would carve out people moving trucks and buses for, I believe it was daycare and retirement centers that you mentioned. I just wanted to clarify whether something like a university would be eligible for those set aside funds with this update.
Yeah, so for right now, it's just, a proposed idea. We're hoping to get insight on that change. It would be for privately owned companies. So I don't think, because we do have a transit set aside, so ISEF we would want to reserve for those private small fleets that are hoping to explore zero emission trucks and these smaller buses. So for right now, I don't think that we would consider a public university, but that is something we can consider, I think, going forward.
Yeah, that makes sense, Olivia. Thank you. And I would strongly encourage that you do. We do have 23 universities in the system, many of which operate some of these smaller people moving buses, or shuttles, if you will.
Yeah.
And obviously would be very interested in whatever funding could be used to support those initiatives. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Matt. Matt, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, this is Matt Schrapp from the Harbor Trucking Association. Olivia, I do have a couple questions here on ISEF. Have you guys envisioned building any off-ramps into this ISEF plan, specifically if it is undersubscribed or if you're not seeing the uptick that potentially the money could go back into HVIP? Is that something you guys have entertained?
You know, I'm not sure. I might revert to someone in HVIP who has more experience with how we move the funding around. But I will say that in the first year in ISEF, we were quickly oversubscribed, and there has been a lot of interest from small fleets. One thing that we're trying to encourage is more of those innovative strategies. So we're proposing, as Matt mentioned earlier, we're proposing moving 50 million to fund further fund ISEF for this opening in August. And so we'll fund 50 million towards standard purchases, but then we'll also reserve that original 33 million for those innovative strategies. And we're also hoping that, you know, the funds continue to be available. It is hard to have this start and stop nature for voucher requests. So we hope that, and also, you know, we need to get like these small fleets connected with these providers, and it takes time, and it takes time to get all the documentation. So we would hope that we continue to have funds, and so we can get small fleets to take advantage of these opportunities. Matt, do you have anything else to add? I'm assuming that, you know, if we need funding other places in HVIP, we have that flexibility to move funds.
Yeah, the quick answer is that the existing approved funding plan approved by the board last year includes provisions providing us with the ongoing authority to move around funds within the program. ISEF is a set aside within HVIP, so we do have the authority to move funds based on demand, lack thereof, or other operational needs.
Great, thank you. And as you said, Matt, right, you know, it's unpredictable. It's hard to see from one year to the next. And on that point, thank you very much, Olivia. Just on that point, I think this question was asked earlier by the gentleman from Daimler. When will we see what the ISEF breakdown was? And Matt, I looked at that link that you sent me about HVIP, and I'm sorry, maybe I'm technologically challenged here, but I'm not finding a breakdown of all previously allocated projects by description. And just for our friend at the Otay Mesa Chamber, that page does have the fleet size. How is fleet size defined? So you can see it exactly what they say for fiscal year 22 to 23 frequently asked questions. Okay, so will we be able to see, or is there someplace we can see what that ISEF projects or requests look like previously?
Yeah, so I can give you a little bit of background on what was requested. So back last year in the first opening of ISEF, we had 73 unique fleets apply. 69% were domiciled in disadvantaged communities. 114 of these projects were voucher requests for standard vehicle purchases. 45 were for leases, 20 were for truck as a service. And my data shows one rental voucher quick request, but Lisa just mentioned two, so I'm not sure what the actual number is right now. We have seen quite a bit of cancellations for ISEF, and so we will be rolling those funds over into the next opening of ISEF once those cancellations are finalized. We also are still processing a lot of our vouchers, but we do have quite a few in the final stages of redemption. It has proven to be quite a challenge to get the documentation needed for a lot of these small fleets. One thing that's been an issue is U.S. Department of Transportation numbers. One thing that we've been doing is kind of emphasizing the need for all this documentation. and compliance records that are needed for ISEF in our dealer training. We also had a small fleet webinar for ISEF participants and a dealer webinar. So that's kind of what the holdup is, but we can definitely share a breakdown of what technologies were requested. And then once we have more final numbers for what was redeemed in the first year of ISEF, we'll be happy to share that.
That's great. By GVWR is helpful too,
Okay.
especially for those who have canceled in GVWR and vocation.
Okay.
Because again, the challenge becomes, infrastructure is very difficult, and it's difficult to cash flow this stuff out. Honestly, these trucks are still pretty darn expensive. The zero emission loan program is not in effect yet. You have lenders who are hesitant to loan on an equipment that doesn't have a secondary market. And I know that, Matt, you alluded to, next year there's discussions about how to help small fleets with that residual value, with those insurance. It doesn't have any of those issues, larger fleets. So, hopefully that might resonate at some point in time. I don't know for how many years everyone's been saying it, but ideally, especially on the ones that have been canceled and the ones that were followed through with the full funding, understanding GVWR category and vocation. I don't know if you guys are, I believe in the application, it asks if you're a drayage truck. So that'd be helpful to see that data. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up on the data set, dropping a link. This is just direct link to the map that's also in the previous link I dropped to HVIP impacts. If you scroll to the bottom of the map, you'll see a button that says download CSV all data. And if you click that, you'll get the Excel spreadsheet that contains all the data shown above, plus some extra. You'll be able to actually look to see how many and what type of vehicles were funded by redemption year.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I got Lisa. It looks like Lisa McGee has one more question. So we're going to go ahead and take that question. And then since we've been going at this for almost 2 hours, I think it'd be good for us to take a quick 10-minute break so people aren't worried about missing out on a topic or something like that. Give everybody a chance to stretch and move around a bit. So Lisa, with that, I'm going to unmute your microphone and then just let everybody know that once Lisa's done, we plan on taking about a 10-minute break.
Hi, that's Lisa with Tom's Truck Center. I had one more sharing information that I think would be very helpful for the ISEF. Since ISEF is a small fleet program and it's kind of got this provider process associated with it, you've got this third-party entity that's trying to support the process and getting them uplifted and familiar, and then campaigning and marketing. It's short when it's too short of a window. Last year, I think you gave us 35 days from the time you announced it, from the time it released. This year, you had your meeting on 7/11 and it's launched on August 30th. We didn't even find out, I think, until like a week ago that it was going to be at 1 p.m. So I think that a minimum 90 days would be very reasonable. It allows people to truly campaign and market it without worrying about sitting on the sidelines and not doing something, because we're still exploring that issue right now. And without an implementation manual to support some of the definitions and details, the Appendix F is only a small picture of the implementation manual that's currently and the updates. It's very confusing. So I think all these support material need to be well planned and thought out for a project to launch successfully, for end users to be comfortable, confident, and feel like they can truly participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so with that, I think we're going to go ahead and take a break. Everybody, we're going to come back at 11 o'clock. So get up, stretch around, get something to eat. We'll see you in 10 minutes. All right, everybody, it's 11 o'clock, so I think we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next portion of our program, talking about the core program and updates. And with that, I'll turn it over to Todd Sterling.
Welcome, everybody. Really appreciate everybody's time and effort today, and lots of great questions to start out the work group. And I hope that continues on here through CORE. CORE is the Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Project. And this is a core project portion of the work group. My name is Todd Sterling. I'm the lead staff overseeing CORE. Rochelle Bishop is here also, my manager, and Eric Brown, who does many things. And one of them is core equipment eligibility. Before we get started, a little information on work group logistics. My presentation is not crazy long. I think it's best if let me run through it all, and then I can answer questions and comments at the end. I also want to mention that this meeting is not about program. This meeting is about program updates for the heavy duty core project for 2024. We're not here to discuss current core vouchers. We're not here to discuss the current contingency list or past contingency list. We're not here to discuss professional landscaping vouchers. If you have questions or comments on those topics or other core topics that we're not discussing on the following slides, feel free to contact me, reach out to me. My contact information will be posted at the end of this presentation. I'll be happy to answer your questions and comments then. So next slide, just a little overview on core, and then go into how core has limited funding, and then some proposed changes for core, and then of course we'll hit questions and comments after that. A little overview of core. As you know or don't know, core started as a first come first served program, and it's still that way. Core is intended to accelerate and deploy the advanced technology in the off-road sector by providing a streamlined way for fleets to access funding, which will help offset the incremental cost of such technology. Core targets commercial-ready products which have not yet achieved a significant market foothold. Core also allows stacking, which means you can use these funds from core and other program funds to help incentivize your project. Also, core does not require scrappage to your current pieces of equipment. There are enhancements for infrastructure, small businesses, and operations in disadvantaged communities. So, as I mentioned at the start of this, core will have limited funding for next year. The staff is recommending to the board that we use $14.3 million from the HVIP funding. We hope that the board will approve that, or it's up to the board, but if they do approve it, we can move forward. The funding plan will go to the board later this year in November. At this time, staff is proposing to only offer core vouchers to small businesses, with some varying equipment categories excluded, such as railroad, cargo handling equipment, and commercial hovercraft. Those would not be eligible for vouchers in 2024. These are high-cost vouchers, and this equipment is not typically used for small businesses. And also terminal tractors, which has been a success in core in the past. Offerings may also be removed. This is becoming a mature zero-emission technology, and we're thinking about removing that for the small businesses next year. Also, removing lead-acid batteries from the core catalog. It may be time to move on from lead-acid batteries. And overall, we'd be looking for voucher offerings to provide enough voucher funding to entice small businesses, but stretch the low funding for next year as much as possible. Next slide, please. We have looked at a few different options to adjust voucher offerings. In the past, we've had used equivalent diesel equipment and the higher cost of zero offering and use that delta as the voucher pricing. With this, we rely a lot on the equipment manufacturers to provide the equivalent diesel equipment pricing. This varies widely, and we're trying to come up with a better solution for that. One solution may be through a base price through equipment MSRP. This is tough. The one variable is the high volume sales and the relationship between owners and manufacturers. Another option could be to use a dollar per kilowatt by equipment type. This also has some difficulties. It may not be fair to all manufacturers or to ARB. We're looking to the owners and operators and the manufacturers for tightening up these ideas, and if they have other options to come up with better voucher pricing. Next slide. We'd also like to complete the core equipment eligibility with a better process for manufacturers and CARB. Right now, CARB staff is wading through hundreds of pages of data, sales material to dig out the required information, long list of equipment types, and really long alphanumeric equipment model numbers to wade through. Also, if you're going to renew what is already eligible, maybe a one-page form is all you need to complete. All this, and we still want to keep core at zero emission. We've heard of a lot of comments about the 3-year warranty. We want to keep the best possible warranty to protect the owner operators of this equipment. But there are cases where equipment types this may not work, and we'd like to know what that is. I've heard that the 3-year warranty would be difficult in commercial hovercraft, and maybe that's why we have so few commercial hovercraft equipment into the catalog at this time. We'd like to hear more about that and how we could, one, protect the owner operator with the best possible warranty, but still make sense for the manufacturer. The telematics requirements. Some manufacturers are struggling with this requirement. How can we make these requirements easier? We do need data to show where the equipment operates, especially if you're operating in a disadvantaged community and you received an enhancement for that. Would there be an automatic process to do that? Right now, require a quarterly report. Would it be easier to provide data annually? Overall, we need data, right, for this program. But how can we make this as easy as possible for the OEM and the operator? So I'd like to open up for questions and comments. Again, I think the last slide will have a contact us. So you have my email address, so you can always contact me for questions. And again, if you have questions or comments that relate specifically to your equipment or your equipment type that really doesn't fall into this, give me a call, send me an email. I'd be happy to set up a meeting. We can talk one-on-one on those subjects. But open it up right now to those things that we just talked about in the slides.
Sounds good, Todd. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of hands up. I do want to remind people that we'll get have an opportunity at the end to ask questions about everything. This is specifically about core. So with that being said, I'm going to pause just for a minute, see if anybody wants to lower their hand. If not, I will go ahead and call on the first person, which is Harmony. Harmony, please, I'm going to unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi there, this is Harmony Gates with York Engineering. Hi, Todd. It's been a
Morning,
while
Harmony.
since we chatted.
Good to hear from you.
I just was curious. You mentioned the idea of the core funding being available only to small businesses. Would there be a time where it would be released to non-small businesses if monies are not taken up? Because from what I'm seeing, mostly large fleets are trying to go after core funding, and a lot of small businesses are not there or are not needing to go to zero yet. So if there's a chance that you limit it to small businesses and the monies are not used, I'm just curious if there's a way to say after 8 months, it can be opened up to any size fleet or company.
That's a great comment, Harmony. That we could write that into the next year's implementation manual. But I just want to point out that this year we had a $10 million set aside for small businesses. as we kicked off January 18th of 2023. That sold out fairly quickly and oversubscribed fairly quickly. So the $10 million went fairly fast in a matter of minutes. This year we'll only have $14.3 million. I don't see it happening, but we could write that something into the IM just in case.
Okay, thanks for the consideration.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Terry. Terry, I'm going to unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hey Todd, this is Terry Mannies from Orange EV.
Morning, Terry.
Excuse me. So I'm wondering, I'm looking at the ticker that is up right now, and I'm wondering what makes the determination for something that is considered a mature technology. I mean, if we go just by oversubscription, then TRUs and MPUs would also be potentially eliminated from core. So I'm just trying to understand better what makes something considered a mature technology.
Yeah, maybe mature isn't the right term, but we do offer a lot of vouchers to terminal tractors, probably more so than any other category. We funded quite a few terminal tractors, and then funded quite a few on that contingency list. We're just looking at ways to stretch the money as far as we can for small businesses, and talking with terminal tractor manufacturers in the past. Small companies are not really looking at terminal tractors. That they look at used diesel tractors to help their businesses. Maybe I've overspoke. Maybe terminal tractors would fund to small businesses. I don't know 100%, but like I said, we're just trying to stretch the dollars as far as we can and help small businesses where we can.
Sure, understood. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from, I believe it's pronounced Jorge. If not, I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation. You have to unmute on your end as well.
Now?
There you go. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So yes, Jorge, yes, that's correct. From Atlas Copco. Thank you. Nice to see you, Todd. Yeah, you mentioned that you plan to remove equipment categories. I was wondering also, as the technology evolves and there are new technologies coming, are you maybe planning also to add new categories? Is it something that you consider?
I think if we had flush with money and had a lot of money to spend, I think we could expand categories. And I think also if small businesses come to us and say, hey, small businesses really need X type of equipment, we could add those into the catalog. But right now, with limited funding coming for 2024, we're looking at kind of scaling down, especially in the areas where we offer a large, like $1 million voucher amounts, say for railroads, right? So I'm guessing there's not a lot of small businesses that have their own railroad. There might be. I'm not 100% sure.
Sure.
But would do so. To offer a $1 million rail car, and that would take up quite a bit of funding when we only have 14.3 to spend next year.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Jorge.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands raised in regards to core, so I'll give it another minute, and if we don't see any hands raised for core, I think we can open this up to all the topics. So if you have a question or comment about anything that was discussed today, please raise your hand, and we'll be happy to discuss it further. And with that, I see Matt's raised his hand. Matt, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Thanks again. This is Matt Schrapp with the Harbor Trucking Association. So just real quick, I'm sure there's a lot of other hands up, so we won't belabor this. I think there's a pretty consistent message about, especially the reimbursement process, as well as some of the restrictions relative to fleet size. And, in drayage, again, perhaps, not trying to shortchange the small fleets by any means, but a change maybe to allow for that 20 trucks or $15 million in revenue could be at least a policy change that I imagine you guys would entertain. Into the other realm of things that doesn't seem to want to be entertained is perhaps a concept where, especially for the drayage uptick, that if you're not seeing a tremendous amount of small fleet participation, that there would be some type of mechanism that would allow those larger fleets, the outright purchase requirement, I understand, perhaps that needs a different perspective relative to Class 8. Matt, I was looking at the data that you sent over, or that you linked in about some of the deployments of zero emissions. The majority of stuff is in the medium duty category. And it's not necessarily reflective of a Class 8 category, which many would probably argue that the incremental costs that ARB is using comparatively for a Class 8 tractor, let's just call it a day cab, are probably low, because these trucks out the door are about, depending on the manufacturer, $450,000 to $500,000 plus. So for larger fleets, especially the ones that have the 30 outright purchase requirement, that is a massive expenditure. And if maybe we can think again, specific to drayage, if you guys aren't seeing utilization of that enhancement or just overall subscription in general, that there should be an off-ramp for drayage in the spirit of supporting the regulatory programs, that there would be something entertained where fleets that were larger over those size thresholds could have something that's modified that would be more reflective of the reality. Because again, while we wait for the infrastructure to develop, the larger fleets, well capitalized, can purchase this equipment, run it, get it back to their OEM partners who have the capability of refurbishing, and then put that into the secondary marketplace, where you'll see probably much closer diesel price parity. So, I don't know if there's a willingness to do that. I understand where the implementation manual is probably a cooked goose at this point in time. Matt, I don't know, you said it was going to be coming out soon. Maybe you can comment on whether that will be at. And then the one outstanding question that maybe from someone from staff, and I'm sorry, I can't seem to locate it, whether or not for hydrogen, if there are the same type of fleet size restrictions for hydrogen powered vehicles. Just those two clarifications would be helpful, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, so the implementation manual update that I referenced is actually the delayed fiscal year 22-23 IM. So each year after the funding plan, the implementation manual gets updated to reflect the policies that were approved in that funding plan. So this is actually for the policies that were approved in last year's funding plan, the fiscal year 22-23. We would be doing a second separate update to the funding plan after this year's funding plan was adopted by the board. So that would be the fiscal year 23-24 update, which would be next year. Haven't even started on that. The work on that would start after the approval of the funding plan. So we'll have work groups, the usual public process for implementation of the funding plan that includes the implementation manual. So that is yet to come.
Well, I appreciate that clarification for sure. Thank you, Matt. And I think that most people are just, understanding the process here, and there's some newbies here. So welcome to the rodeo. But when I say the goose is cooked, it means that there just seems to be very little willingness to entertain some of these type of discussions. And I will touch base with you and staff offline. But I think for the benefit of the group here, again, if it is important to contact ARB and to help them understand some of the realities, especially, Matt, as you alluded to, how, you asked the question of how can we impact get input on the assessment of the impact of the fleet size limitations. And we would be happy to facilitate those discussions with fleets that are impacted and why they're making the decisions they are, especially in the larger category. That is an open invitation from the Harbor Trucking Association at any time. We have the largest fleets in the nation all the way down to 1-2 truck small fleets. So the invitation is open, and I appreciate the clarification on that. So just last thing, is there the hydrogen fleet size caps? Is that something that is if for hydrogen platforms, is that also limited by fleet size? Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry, I meant to check on that really quickly. So I'll do that now and get back to you in just a sec. Or one of my colleagues might have the answer to that. But I just did want to clarify that when you suggested like some sort of like off ramp or some mechanism that would allow us to make changes, that's just the first I've heard of it, and that is absolutely something that we're willing to consider. We last year had a similar off ramp, so for if demand didn't materialize, that we would open up parts of a small fleet set aside, so that we want to have maximum flexibility and provide the board with the opportunity to weigh in on that flexibility. So that is, just want to be clear, that is absolutely something that we will consider.
Matt, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that here in this platform, because it's important, and while it might be the first time that we've heard it here in this setting, the concepts are there. It's just a matter of determining the amounts. And I think the more input that you get relative to willingness for purchase by a host of fleet sizes, the better informed you guys will be to help the board understand. But end of the day, you know, in light of, again, the support to regulatory programs, drayage, I think, really needs to have a different look just because of the regulatory requirements. And you do not have the same type of complexity relative to determining if your fleet is in compliance, if you're a high priority fleet category. It's either drayage or not. And as long as you're within your useful life, you're in compliance. And since there's no scrappage requirement in HVIP, this makes it a lot easier to try to apply even further enhancements, off ramps and the like to support this segment. We have the first requirement is in less than 4 months away. So I appreciate that. And I hope everyone on the call can appreciate that as well, that while there's only a limited amount of money to go around, fleets of all sizes engage in drayage, as since we're first up with the biggest infrastructure challenges, especially because even according to ARB, up to 75% of the fleet, at least half, is going to rely on public facing charging infrastructure, and there are no off ramps to help small fleets. So they need more time. And this is a way to really try to get that money into the marketplace, get those trucks down to folks as that infrastructure develops. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Andrea. She got back to me. Hydrogen is not subject to the bulk purchase or fleet size reductions until fuel cells reach a higher market penetration. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you. And our next comment or question is going to.
I just wanted to jump in here too, just to kind of piggyback on what Matt had said. You know, we do have a public process and welcome everybody's comments. You know, we typically try to make whatever policy changes we can, and we take that to the board. And of course, whatever the board directs us to do, or whatever the legislature directs us to do, we have to take. That's the direction that we have to take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so our next question or comment is going to come from Leah. Leah, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, this is Leela Rao from the Port of Long Beach. I just wanted to come on and reiterate Matt Schrapp's points. You know, we strongly agree that there needs to be a close look at this, specifically at the drayage segment, and his idea about an off-ramp to allow the larger fleets to bypass the bulk purchase requirements, assuming that there's, you know, continues to be this really slow uptake is really critical. I know we've talked to staff at CARB about this in the past, and I'm really glad to see that at least the 50 fleet size cap is going to be postponed for a year, and that there's some willingness to take a look at some of these other strategies to get these trucks on the road. We really do have just such a small number of zero emission drayage trucks, and while the number is growing, it is growing really slowly. You know, we're going to be kicking off our own voucher supplement program in the coming months, and we're hopeful that will help to spur the market a little bit more. But you know, this is really tough, and as Matt mentioned, there's just the lack of infrastructure is really limiting to these small fleets. And so getting these trucks on the road into the hands of the larger fleets, if that's what it takes for the time being, then, I think we need to really take a close look at that. We obviously really want to support the small fleets, and I love the idea of pulling over the small fleet sort of standard purchases from ISEF into HVIP. I think that's really going to help for those small fleets that can take advantage. But I think we need to have all the options on the table. And so I just wanted to kind of reiterate those points and give strong support to HDA's comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our next comment or question is going to come from Adrian. Adrian, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, Adrian Martinez with Earth Justice. Thanks for the presentation. I actually had a conflict, so I missed the first part of the meeting. But I had a specific comment on school buses for Andrea. There has been a focus on school bus deployments in rural areas, and while that's important, we want to see a lot of electric school buses in places like the San Joaquin Valley. I was wondering if there is going to be more focus on other larger urban areas like Los Angeles Unified School District and some of the other places and other non-attainment areas. I know that this program is to push the technology development, but we'd love to see some investments in these larger school districts because there's a lot of need there as well.
Hey, Adrian. Yeah, that's a really great question. So we have, as you know, with some of our more recent funding focused on some of the more rural areas, particularly school bus deployments in small and medium air districts, because historically we know those areas have had less access to funds to support the transition of their school bus fleets. We do anticipate that with this larger pot of funding that will become available next year, the $375 million that was referenced earlier in the presentation, we'll be looking at some different prioritization schemes. Those will include things like a bit of a focus on some of the smaller school districts, not necessarily in rural areas, but just something defined as a small school district, as well as districts that have a high unduplicated pupil count. So that's school districts that have a high number of students on free or reduced lunches, a high percentage of foster youths, and a high percentage of English language learners. So these are some of the things that we're preliminarily thinking about. We'll be getting more into that in an implementation work group process, which we anticipate will be starting up later this fall. So certainly encourage those who are interested in the specifics of the school bus funding to keep an eye out for notices and join us in some of those discussions.
Thank you.
Before I make the call on the next one, I do want to remind everybody that this is being recorded. So if you did miss the beginning of the work group or parts of the work group had to step away, we will post this on the whole work group on our website. Our next comment or question is going to come from Jennifer. Jennifer, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation. Jennifer, I see you unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, had to open up a laptop. Okay, so thank you. I'm Jennifer Marshall with South Tahoe Public Utility District. And so this is all new information for me, so I apologize for my lack of some of the background with these programs. But I just have a question. So most of our fleets and trucks are used for construction and repair of sewer and water systems. So are any of these sources or vouchers, would they be applicable to these very small and specified purpose that are not kind of related to trucking and hauling?
Are you referring to on-road vehicles, off-road, mix of both?
Both, probably, yes.
So I would recommend going to the respective websites for HVIP and CORE, californiahvip.org and californiacore.org. And each of those has a vehicle and equipment catalog that will show you all the different types of vehicles and equipment that are eligible for funding. For HVIP, for example, spans Class 2B to Class 8, all different types of vocations, lots of options in there.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in for CORE, Jennifer, that CORE does offer incentives for construction equipment and other types of equipment for off-road. Again, like Matt said, you can go to a webpage. I can always email me and I can walk you through that also.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Alejandra again. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yes, thank you. Alejandra Miritaran with the Otay Mesa Chamber of Commerce. Again, and Matt, we welcome the opportunity to meet, just some food for thought while we meet. From what I recall yesterday and not knowing much of these funding programs, I believe all the benefits come through the dealers. And in this case, I would think the HVIP only through the US dealers, which could be a real challenge for the Mexican truckers, especially since we have a lot of the electric trucks manufactured in Mexico. So I think the opportunity is to have the US dealers, the California dealers, working with their counterparts in Baja or in Mexico, because logistically to send the truck to the US, exporting it and then importing it back, I think it would be a nightmare. Also for tax reasons, financially, the Mexican companies need to make the deductions with the Mexican government, of course. And so I don't know if that's been considered. So even if they're registered, because I did see an out-of-state registration in the Secretary of State, fortunately. But again, if the benefit is only through the California dealer, if we could get them to work with their counterparts in Baja, I think that would truly work. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we definitely need to think about that. HVIP was certainly designed with American dealers, California dealers in mind. I don't know how it would work. There may be restrictions, like legally, statutorily, on us sending money out of country, because you're right, the way that HVIP works, the dealer essentially sells the vehicle with the voucher amount included at delivery and voucher redemption, then that amount is paid to the dealer. So we would have to do some digging on that, and if we would be able to send money to another country.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah, we'll look into that. Thank
Really
you.
important. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I see Matt's got another comment or question. So actually, I'm going to go to Mark first, since Matt, you already had a chance here at the end. We will get to you, but I'm going to go to Mark first. Mark, go ahead and state your name and affiliation.
My name is Mark Roost. I'm with Sustainable Energy Inc. and Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition. And I thought about what Alejandro just said, and what you just said, is that if CARB were to underwrite financing for production of clean vehicles or conversion of to clean vehicles, either one or both, in the United States, then say we could finance, or our associates could finance if they had the underwriting of the financing, then they could be financing the purchase of vehicles by companies in Mexico. So it would be indirect. Instead of directly sending HVIP money, it would be sending a different program's money, or the state of California's other money, to the company that is selling into Mexico from the United States, exporting into Mexico from the United States, so that company could then finance to its purchasers.
We'll ruminate on this Mark, but this is going to be a lot more complicated than that.
I bet. I
Yeah.
would like to explore it though with you. I'd like to find out about what you think
Okay.
when you've figured out how it could work or couldn't work or whatever.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Okay, Matt, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation again.
Thank you again. And I get it. You guys, we're all sick of hearing from me. Trust me. I am.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I'm just trying to give everybody an equal opportunity. So that's
Just a
it.
joke. Just a joke. Got to have some levity in all of this stuff here, as I'm sure everyone listening can attest to. This was basically in response to Rochelle. I can appreciate that public outreach, public forum. It's a good thing, right? The challenge becomes, if you want to hear directly from fleets, a lot of times they aren't going to put themselves out into a public situation. It's just the nature of the beast, as evidenced by, I haven't heard it from any fleets today. Maybe there's some on, but in drayage, I think the best way that it can be described about where drayage fits into the supply chain is probably by Noel Hasgaba, Dr. Hasgaba at Port of Long Beach, who, when he was hearing from his fellow friends and during his PhD, that once he took the job at Long Beach, they're like, oh, well, it's not rocket science. And his response was, you're right, it's more complicated. And I don't know if there's been enough of an effort by the ARB to really appreciate the nuances and complexities of drayage and just merely focusing on small fleets. And so the public process, while it's there and we appreciate it, and this is a democracy, you guys are a public agency, that's what you need to do. And I'll tell you, the sentiment feels like just checking boxes. And so we're inviting that if staff is interested in doing that, as opposed to us dragging people to these various workshops throughout the months to express some concern that seems to fall on deaf ears, to be honest, then that's, I guess, the way the public process works. But, again, I think that there's an opportunity here for you guys, especially since this funding plan hasn't been finalized and we don't have the implementation manual yet for 23-24, that this is the time to try to understand that and to look at things that can help make this deployment of zero emission vehicles successful. Again, supporting the regulatory programs. The regulatory programs is about drayage. That's what's coming up very first here. So just wanted to respond to that. Appreciate your staff's time today. You guys always do a great job of presenting the information. So appreciate the opportunity to comment. And with that, thank you.
All right, Matt, appreciate that. Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that everybody does understand that, we do our best to have this as a public process. And that's why I led with, we welcome everybody's comments, because we do need to hear from small fleets, large fleets. We need to hear from everybody, enviros. So, I encourage everybody to speak. You've heard Matt, and Todd and Olivia, when we hear ideas, we take those back and we consider those ideas. So I do encourage everybody on here to participate, because this is really how we learn about about what is needed and what policy changes that we could provide.
Okay, our next comment or question is going to come from Brett. Brett, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yeah, Brett Stevens, Daimler Trucks North America. Thank you very much. And Rochelle, absolutely thank you for your statements. And I will echo a lot of Matt's sentiments as well, that we definitely appreciate our ability to be participative in this process. I would just say it shouldn't be a secret that Daimler Trucks wants to sell more trucks, and we want to sell more electric trucks. Therefore, Daimler and CARB have a shared goal of deploying more electric trucks in the state of California. We do see a litany of challenges that are limiting the adoption of our products, many of them discussed today. DTNA has a corporate culture of making our experts and our expertise available to any stakeholders in this process to better understand our voice of the industry and what will move the needle to deploy more medium and heavy duty vehicles. To Matt's point there, I haven't heard many fleets speak up, and I understand their shyness to do so. Our voice can become an effective conduit regarding what our fleets are experiencing during this transition. And, again, the faster we can scale our electric truck products in those deployments, the faster the state of California will realize the emissions benefits of electric vehicles. So we're an open book. Don't hesitate to reach out any of the stakeholders in this process. Thank you again for allowing us to participate in the public workshop, and let's fight the good fight together.
Thank you, Brett. Our next comment or question is going to come from Lisa. Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation again.
Hi, yes, this is Lisa with Tom's Truck Center. I think I wanted just to add and kind of emphasize that I'm really concerned about how we didn't, and sorry, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if my volume was off. Okay. I wanted to emphasize that it's really difficult, and I'm not sure how much you guys are aware of this, to run the project or the program on the dealership side, even for the fleets, without an implementation manual. And I'm concerned that we're in August 10th and the 2023 implementation manual is just not available as a resource. I know you guys have got updates, but even the updates don't have like a notification. And it would be really nice and helpful as you guys like change the DAC on July 1 or whatever day it was, if there was literally a notification that went out, because it gets confusing when these things don't match up and you don't know about it in the back and forth through a review process, or for anybody else that wants to participate and expects to have that opportunity or that benefit. So I'm just trying, why don't we have the implementation manual by now? I'm kind of curious.
As you know, HVIP is a large and complicated program that has trended up in recent years. Number of reasons for why the IM has been slow in coming out, but we do hope that that will be out very soon. And as always, we appreciate the feedback on ways that we can make the program more accessible and usable to all participants, whether those be purchasers, dealers, or OEMs.
Yeah, and I think maybe you guys need to have like a ticket system so that the tickets can be monitored and watched, so that these delays that happen. I think there's also like that we don't sometimes know who we're talking to. We just get this broad email that's an EMC VPC email, and we don't identify the person. I think that gets to be difficult too, because sometimes, we're able to better communicate when all of us are at least dealing with the person that we know who we're dealing with, and then we're not just sending a broad email that it has an opportunity for improvement. And I'm hoping that these lessons learned from this experience in 2023 moves forward in a way that doesn't get this repeated as far as delaying the implementation manual, regardless of how hard it is. I think we just got to be over prepared for that fact, so that the stakeholders can really participate more effectively.
Thanks, Lisa. We'll
Okay,
take that back.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Dirk. Dirk, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yeah, my name is Dirk Piersma. I am with Gimperly Family Farms here in the Central Valley. I'm the fleet maintenance manager here. My biggest concern with all of this is, one, we're technically considered a large fleet in this state because of the amount of money we make, even though we aren't a big fleet. So I know the 2024 stuff that's coming through now is we're going to have to start purchasing electric vehicles. And we're in a unique situation here, as we are in the ag sector. We raise live animals as part of our business. And the biggest things that we're seeing is really there's a lack of communication to the fleets in general. I mean, I stumbled across a bunch of these meetings just out of my own intuition, trying to find information. And the biggest thing that I am concerned with all of this is, especially here in the Central Valley, I mean, our electrical supply, you know, for being able to charge trucks, the big push to do all this EV stuff, we're not seeing any infrastructure work happening here in the Central Valley. I don't know about anywhere else. And then also we keep hearing from our local electrical supply companies too, is that the state is pushing to do as much green energy as possible, which is great on paper, but at the same time, I'm looking at their implementation rates, and it's looking like we're going to have a big problem with being able to supply power. And that affects our business because we have to be able to feed animals, and you start having animal husbandry laws come into effect. So my biggest question is there also funding to help with basically the supply side of all this electrical stuff? You know, not just putting chargers in at company stations and all that other stuff, but actually to improve the infrastructure. Do you guys have any information on that?
Yeah, thank you for that, Dirk. So the transition to zero emission certainly is not going to happen overnight, and it's a multi-system approach. The state involves multiple agencies to tackle various problems because they all are big on their own. So for example, with utility build out of infrastructure, like for charging EVs, as well as for improving the makeup of our electrical grid, the California Public Utilities Commission is the lead on that. But we work with them to make sure that all of our work is coordinated, as well as with the Energy Commission, which also has a large role in infrastructure. One thing I would love to share with everyone is our Cal Fleet Advisor. This is a new program that has just launched that can help fleets to understand the process through which that they will need to electrify, connect them with experts where appropriate to get information, as well as provide them information about incentives and other support programs that may be available to them. It's designed to provide wraparound support. So I encourage you to go to calfleetadvisor.org. I've dropped a link to that in the chat as well, so that everyone can check that out.
Thank you very much, Matt. At this time, I'm not seeing any more raised hands, so I think we're wrapping up. You know, just everybody, there's the contact list for all the program leads. Make sure you have that. The presentation will be available online, as well as the recording at a would you say, Matt, couple weeks?
Yeah, so all the meeting materials, the agenda and the PDF of the slides we showed today are available. They are posted on our meetings and events website now. And the recording for this meeting will be posted there within the next 2 weeks as well. So I thank everyone for their time in joining us today. And we will keep you updated on the funding plan process. One final reminder that we will have a workshop on August 31st for the entirety of the funding plan. So we hope to see you there as well. Thank you so much and have a great day.